What does it take to find yourself in the pages of Men's Health? What does it take to find yourself working out with Arnold Schwarzenegger? What's up, Active Lifers? Welcome back to the Active Life Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sean Pastuch. My guest today is Ebenezer Samuel. He's the director of fitness for Men's Health magazine, and he drops a wealth of knowledge on today's podcast about everything that you want to know, from how to start exercising a little bit differently, how to think about learning from people who have done the things you're trying to do, all the way into how do you actually become a contributor to a magazine like Men's Health? What does it take to bring that kind of value? I know you're going to love this podcast. Please remember, when you do, head to wherever you're listening to it. Leave us that 5-star rating, write a review, share it with a friend. Let's get you to the show. Ebenezer Samuel, welcome to the Active Life Podcast.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
Dude, it's a trip to have you here. It really is. I've been watching your stuff ever since we first connected, maybe like 7-8 months ago on Instagram. And you always present professionally and thoroughly. It's always, here's the full thing you need to know. Not like, here's one tip and then come click my opt-in to get the rest. And I love that. I appreciate it. Dude, you just got done with what I imagine was one of the most thrilling and perhaps, and I'm curious, intimidating workouts of your life.
It was a unique, it was probably one of the most thrilling moments of my life, wedding and birthdays for the wife and all that stuff, notwithstanding.
She knows.
It was probably one of the most thrilling moments in my life. I very much grew up on Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is our July-August issue cover for Men's Health, and grew up on Terminator. That's the reason I fitness in the first place. And I got to write the cover, got to train with him as part of that adventure. And it was crazy just how it manifested. It was a Gold's Gym in Venice. We were waiting for him. Arnold shows up after crew and after Men's Health and everything. We were waiting for him. Didn't know if I was going to train with him. He has an assistant, awesome guy named Daniel Ketchel. And Ketch literally walks up to me and he's like, he wants to train with you. Jump in the workout. You don't need to ask me twice. I mean, technically, I wanted to make sure, like I heard it right. So I was like, he really wants to train with me.
Right.
I assume it's because I was a writer. I didn't care though. I was instantly into the workout. It's wild because he's 75. He still has that aura about him. There's that legendness to him. He just works. He works a really simple circuit. It's all machines. But just like, I've trained on machines before and I've trained before, but just kind of being around him, the thing he hasn't lost, he's lost, a little bit like what you would expect. He's 75. He's lost some strength. He's lost some muscle. He still goes hard, but he has not lost that ability to motivate and push you. Late in the workout, we started with the shoulder circuit, finished with bicep tricep superset, because you can't not blast arms with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He stepped behind me when I was doing a set of preacher curls, and literally guided me through the set. And, it was just, it was a surreal moment where it's less about the pump and the gains and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, this is the guy who got me into lifting, and he's telling me exactly what to do. And it was just, it was a blast. So people should definitely check out the cover. Probably one of the funnest stories to report, and then I just lifted with the guy, and also write too, because there's so much. I mean, he has so much history. Trying to distill that into 2,500, 3,000 words, it was not easy. I could have written another 1,500 words, but that I don't think they were going to give me the pages. So
you write that for yourself.
Yeah.
I imagine one of the. I'm not going to imagine. I'm going to ask you because I'm curious.
Yeah.
You're a really smart guy. You have a lot of education around this stuff. You know what you're doing. You don't need, not that you don't want somebody to come help you do things better, but you don't need someone to come up from behind you and be like, squeeze a little bit more at the top. So
yeah,
when Arnold is coming to teach you something, how easy was it for you to just turn your brain off on the things that you know and just say, I'm going to pretend I know nothing and listen to everything Arnold Schwarzenegger tells me? It was
challenging in some ways and refreshing in others. I think when you go into lift with the guy like that, I'm also a very control freak about my workout too. I have a very specific way I want to do things, very specific goals. And to be like, if we ever train together, and I know you've had Don Saladino on the podcast, when I think the first time I trained with Don, he wants to obviously help and provide that guidance. And I was like, okay, so I do this and this and this, and it's this day. And so this is obviously not that. But I think I went in because it's a chance to train with the legend. I think I went in with a little bit more of an open mind to start, and I was willing to turn off my trainer mind and almost just be a little bit of a fanboy. I think I thought about it very much the day before. I think I might have actually talked to Don about it. It's like I want to get a good workout, but I really just want to kind of be around him and soak it up. It's also interesting too because the way he does things is different. It's very old school. I would consider myself a little bit more. I would probably you too to some extent. Like we come from that more. We have like a more sciencey take on fitness, very different from the golden age of bodybuilding. I watched Pumping Iron the day before going to train with Arnold, and that's a bunch of guys who are and this is not bad at all, but they're putting extreme full range of motion on everything, lifting incredibly heavy, going until they can't do it anymore. And I've met so many bodybuilders just in. I started training in New York when I went to a bodybuilding gym in the Bronx. All those guys who I trained with can't lift their shoulders over their heads, and so that's always been in the back of my mind with bodybuilding. That's kind of the background that he comes from and the training style that he comes from. But I think the trainer side of my mind didn't completely turn off, and it was like, what can I learn from Arnold? Because, and this is, I think, I try to be very data driven with how I approach things, and the evidence is what you see, right? The reality is there is a ton that I can learn from this guy because in his golden era, he was the finest physique, right? So on some level, I can learn a bunch from that, and so I think there were little things that I took or refresher courses that he gave me that I absorbed a lot. And I think the two biggest things I absorbed from him that I kind of took is one. I need to lift with Don more, right? Like,
why is that? Why?
I tend to train by myself, and because it's hard to find a good training partner, right? Don is probably up in this area. My lifts with Don are great, and he's a great training partner, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be him, but there is virtue. And Arnold and I talked about this afterwards. We actually went to lunch afterwards. Supposed to be a half-hour lunch. We wound up talking for like 2 hours.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Lunch with the legend, right? Can't go wrong with that. But he basically said he always, once he got to California from Austria, he almost always had a training partner, and you get a little push from that person. When you train by yourself, you can go heavy, right? And I obviously like to push the load, trying to build serious muscle, and I can go heavy, but I can't really challenge myself to that next level that I could if I had the right training partner. And it's not that doesn't necessarily mean just, hey, let me go grab somebody to go give me a spot, but having like a nice continuous training partner who knows how I think, who can push me a little bit, who also knows when I shouldn't be pushed. I think there's a lot of virtue in that, and that's something that I guess I kind of remembered or walked away from the Arnold experience thinking about. The other thing he is very big on is full range of motion. So it's all machines we're doing. I feel like I definitely, in my normal training, I will incorporate a lot of partial reps, let me work in the most challenging range of motion for a little bit longer. I play around with a lot of those pieces. He is very much, the weight's got to touch, you got to hear the stack touch on the bottom of every single rep, and let's go until the machine's not going to permit any more range of motion for you. And that's very different from how I train. So it was a good refresher course in the virtues of that full range of motion. There are downsides to that too. It means I may not load as aggressively. It means that I have to be careful with certain things, but it was a good refresher course and just food for thought for when I got out of there. Just how am I going to incorporate that into my training? I think there's something, when you're with a guy like that, there's always something you can learn. And so those are the two big, gym style takeaways for me.
What's interesting about that, the most interesting thing about the full range of motion on machines thing to me is they're so paradoxical.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
Full range of motion on the machine.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why wouldn't we do free weight then? Isn't that
Yeah.
But you're right. It's this level of like, okay, I'm just going to shut off what I think I know.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let the guy who created bodybuilding effectively teach me what to do. I'm just going to follow his lead today.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is Arnold, for again 75 years old, super like there was a time where for all of us on some level, I'm sure for 95% of trainers, we all came up, I want to look like, we were inspired by him on some level, right? 75 years old. So I think the other thing I walked away thinking is on some level, for a lot of us trainers, for a lot of jacked guys in America period, around the world period, that's our future, right? So the alterations that he has made to his training may not necessarily be the ones that I'm going to make, the 45 years down the road. But the alterations he's made to his training are things that I'm going to need to think about at some point. I think that for me, I'm very stubborn. I feel like Don Saladino is probably the same way, right? A lot of, I think, us who are trainers and very into fitness, we're like, I'm going to work my body into being an Adonis, and I'm never going to lose that. That's like forever. I'm going to die that way. And so it was interesting from just seeing the mental shift for the guy who was arguably the ultimate Adonis, right? I remember I asked him, why do you train now? And you can tell a little bit that, he is very cognizant of the fact that he is not the same physical force he was. But he also loves training. And he basically said, I train because at this point I want to be able to move. And so I am kind of curious, just in the long term for myself and for a lot of us who are very passionate about fitness. We're a different generation that's absorbed fitness in a different way. And I think in some ways learned to be a little bit careful. We've learned to cross-train, to experiment with different modalities. I am very curious and interested to see how I'm going to adjust when that time comes. And I think, 75-year-old me, there is going to come a time where a lot of us are going to have to step it back. And for 75-year-old me, when that moment comes, I think there's a relative almost peace of mind that, at the greatest ever was kind of able to make peace with the fact that he couldn't be that anymore and step back and do a bunch of machines and be okay with that. So if I'm 75 and I can't, deadlift 500 pounds, I'm okay.
Right. You don't need to die with tight skin around your abs.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I would like to. I would like to, but exactly. That's exactly it.
Well, I recommend for anyone who's an entrepreneur, I recommend to them watching Pumping Iron. It's not like they're like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you should watch Pumping Iron. Yeah. But when they talk about like documentaries, what do you like? Where have you learned from? Pumping Iron is not a documentary about a guy building a body. It's about a guy building a brand, and not on purpose. Yeah. Right. It's all about like, these are my beliefs, and these beliefs are so strong, I would miss my father's funeral for them. Yeah. Right. Like that's a movie that I think I would follow his workout lead. Yeah. If I thought everything he was saying was wrong, just to glean some of what I think is in his brain about life. Yeah. Right. I had a martial arts instructor one time who was like, I think he was 80 something years old, 82 or so. And he would have me bouncing into my stretches. I'm like, I know this is bad for me, but I'm going to do it anyway. Like maybe there's something that I don't know, and I'm going to just listen to this guy. And it's such an interesting conversation in my head while I was doing that. And I imagine that's why I asked that question, because you're sitting with the legend. Yeah. You are the fitness editor for Men's Health. You clearly know what you're doing.
It's director.
I'm sorry, the fitness director for Men's Health. Yeah. And you got to turn it all off.
Yeah, I feel like when you get around, when you go into somebody else's gym situation, it is good to try to, even, your martial arts instructor, we kind of know, bouncing in stretches, like you said, is not ideal. But I always try to, even if I am highly critiquing whatever trainer X is suggesting I do, I'll kind of go with it and then see where it takes my body. Because maybe I learned something new, or maybe I had like maybe I had walked away from a concept for very good reasons 4 years ago, but it's worth trying now. So I feel like I find it fun to kind of experiment with that stuff sometimes, and just experiment with other ideas to see where it leads.
So I recently interviewed with Mark Bell. I'm sure you're familiar with who Mark Bell is. And he was recently talking about the idea that the nutrition industry hasn't done anything for us since it started. Like we're still supposed to eat food.
Yeah.
Nothing seems to have changed. And I think there's a lot there also for the fitness industry in that, we can change how we do things right now, but there's objectivity that the guys Arnold was working out with who were in his era were physically fit, depending on your definition of fitness, right? But they were aesthetically fit for sure. And that's what a lot of people train for. So now one of the things that I see as being part of the problem that we're running into is people looking to parse that hair so finely that it seems like if you just go for a walk, well, were you breathing through your nose? Was your mouth taped shut?
Yeah.
What was your step cadence? How far were your strides? Like, dude, just go for a walk. It's not that complicated. So what I want to hear from you, because I think you're probably as well tapped into the fitness industry as anybody in the world, is what's going well? What are we doing well as an industry right now?
What are we doing well? I think the thing we're doing well, and it's not just the fitness industry. It's partly because of Arnold. It's a little bit because of COVID, to be honest. It's a lot because of social media, both the good and bad. I think what we've done incredibly well over the last probably 2 to 3 years is we've created a ton of excitement for fitness and a lot of new entry points. There was a time, I think, 10 to 15 years ago, right, where if you wanted to, there was, fit guys go to the gym, right? You go to the gym because you want to build muscle, or you want to lose weight, or for a very specific reason. And you're going to go to kind of some box. It feels inaccessible. It feels daunting. And so a lot of regular people, just if you weren't a fitness enthusiast, you weren't going to do it, or you were going to do it, but you were going to achieve your thing and then you were going to be done, right? I think what's changed is now people are more excited about fitness and they're more aware of what fitness does beyond helping them lose weight or helping them build muscle. The fact that being fit to some extent, if we're getting that regular activity, is going to help us live longer. It's going to make us healthier. There was a little bit of talk, during COVID of if you're healthier, if you have a level of fitness that can help you, get through this. And I think all of that, our health and wellness is a little bit more front and centered because you have that side of it. And then you have this other side where people are more excited about fitness because of all the nonsense. The reality is that they see on Instagram, the guy who does, 25 backflips into a Superman push-up. It's not accessible at all, but it gets people really, really excited because, that guy is not Arnold Schwarzenegger. That guy is, some random guy on Instagram who has, a bunch of followers, but he comes across as, our whole relationship with social media, I think opens the door for us to see some of those guys, or even see somebody like me or somebody like Don Saladino on Instagram. It's like, those guys are really strong. I can do that. I should be doing that. I, in particular, work really, really hard to make my stuff on some level accessible. That way, the 45-year-old dad who, 20 years ago is just a 45-year-old dad and he thinks it's done and that chapter is over. But I'm hoping the 45-year-old dad from my content will get, I can try that biceps workout, not necessarily with the weight he's doing, but I can try it and get something out of it, and maybe I can recapture my body. And so I think we've done a really, really great job in the industry of creating excitement. You've got other entry points too, right? Because now you can go to a gym, now you can, consume all that content on Instagram, and then, whatever we think of it, Peloton, Hydro, this whole era of connected fitness devices opens the door. Granted, there's a high price to entry into that world, but it opens the door for somebody who is super shy, doesn't want to go to the gym, does want to get fit, wants to try to learn how to do this in the privacy of their own home. It brings the fitness to them, and I won't say necessarily doesn't leave them with excuses, because we can turn our Peloton into a coat rack, but it makes it super convenient. and it opens up a different audience. I think when we started bringing technology into fitness, that also made fitness a little bit cool because, a lot of people don't necessarily care about, how much they can bench press. But if you can give them, an Apple Watch to play with that also happens to track their steps, suddenly the steps are a part of their equation in their life too.
It's really interesting. You're coming at something that I've looked at until you talked about it that way very differently, right? I look at the guy who's doing 25 backflips into a push-up and I'm like, you're not helping anybody. But I never considered it in a way that like people will look at that and say, that's really cool. What would the first step be?
And that's something so I try to look at, and it may be because I come from a combination that I have a very heavy media background. Obviously that was my first degree. Well, my second degree after an accounting degree that we're not going to talk about. And then I have a very high passion for fitness, and obviously I held that fitness education as well. But the media background, what I try to do is look at all content as kind of one great big, for us, we look at individual posts, right? Or we look at individual trainers, individual kind of fitness ideas, right? But I think for the average person who's just surfing, scrolling on Instagram, it's all kind of one big giant ball of fitness content, right? And to me, on some level, I kind of went back and forth on it too very early in my career at Men's Health, because I also look at the guy doing 75 backflips into a push-up and I'm like, that's not helping anybody. You're going to hurt somebody. But I think what I've learned to do is view that's a gateway to hopefully get them to me, right? And on some level, it's my responsibility as kind of like both as the fitness director for Men's Health and as also a creator of content in general, to be able to see that exciting thing that is capturing everybody. And sometimes it's going to be a backflip. Sometimes it's going to be a Superman push-up. Sometimes it's going to be, I don't know if you remember the one like 3 or 4 years ago where it's like they had to step over an invisible box. Sometimes it'll be something. It's a crazy... I think it was pre-TikTok, so it was an Instagram challenge. You had to step over. We'll try it after this.
Okay.
But you had to step over an invisible box, and that was actually my first lesson at Men's Health because they really wanted to cover this idea of it's a person who you take like a little step and then you step over a box and you have to be able to do it. And I still don't completely understand the mechanics of it, and I'm probably explaining it completely incorrectly.
No, you're supposed to create the body mechanics as if the box was actually there, but the box isn't there. So when you shoot the video, it looks like you stepped on a box, but the box was never there.
Exactly. So they were like, well, let's put something together on it. I'm like, this is dumb.
How do I extend my knee too much?
Exactly. But the thing I kind of realized from that is that all those situations provide an opportunity for me to teach something beyond this is dumb. People have heard enough about, this is dumb, right? They've also heard, they understand the basics. So the basics, what we need people to, push, we need them to deadlift. They've done all these things or they're familiar with these things. And a lot of times there's a barrier to entry because of that, because they have very bad experience. They had a very bad experience in 5th grade where they couldn't do push-ups, right? And it was embarrassing for them. And they want nothing to do with that. But so they're not excited to do the things we need them to do, until we can show them that by doing the things we need them to do as trainers, by laying that fundamental base, you might be able to do the backflips or you might be able to do the Superman push-ups. Suddenly they have a little bit more purpose to it, and it doesn't feel as connected to whatever bad experience they might have had when they were younger.
Yeah, it can start to feel like play.
Exactly.
It's interesting how you described that, because I went the other way. When I was in, I think it was maybe 3rd or 4th grade, I couldn't do a pull-up. Okay. And I fancied myself a good athlete.
Yeah.
Looking back now, I have a daughter who's 8 and recently asked, how come I'm so fast at home but not at school? And I'm like, well, yeah, okay. I was a late bloomer in everything athletic. Like I was the slowest. My nicknames were swivel hips, crazy legs when I was until 10th grade. And then I became fast all of a sudden. But I couldn't do a pull-up in like 3rd or 4th grade. And Sam Gilman, who was a girl who did gymnastics, could just bang them out. And it was embarrassing that I couldn't do one. But I went the other way.
Yeah.
I was like, no. I'm going to get a pull-up. I'm going to get a lot of pull-ups. And it's just so funny because I don't think like that. I think like the person who sees that and like, I can't do that, so I'm just not going to start.
Yeah. So I'm very much my issue was push-ups, partly because I didn't, for a variety of reasons, I didn't really comprehend that pull-ups existed as something I should figure out. But my issue was push-ups, and I spent a long time. Probably I feel like to me, one of the things I love as kind of a trainer, and I love about the wave of new exercises, and most of them are not very useful,
right?
But
or new.
Yeah, exactly. That too. But one thing I love about kind of the new crazy exercises is every so often you'll see something and you'll be like, there's a use for that. Not necessarily it's not essential for anybody to do, but I can see the practicality of that. I can see, what is, and so I think from a trainer standpoint, when you bump into, especially, I feel like they're almost always bodyweight moves. When you bump into those intriguing bodyweight moves that kind of serve a purpose but aren't essential to fitness, but you kind of want to do it. In my case, because I want a viral Instagram post every so often too. It's problem solving, right? It's what can I take about what I know about the body, what I know about physics, what I know about my own strength, and figure out how to execute the Archer push-up or the Superman push-up. And especially when you come to it with a trainer mindset, I think you wind up, you almost wind up finding, you find maybe a little bit of benefit in the move, and it's a fun little adventure. And my first adventure in fitness ever was the push-up because I couldn't do it, right? And I'm coming up again watching Arnold in Commando, right?
He could definitely do a push-up.
And watching, I remember the one that got me feeling really, really bad about, like 12-year-old me feeling really bad about myself was the first time I watched Rocky, and he's doing one-arm push-ups, and I'm like, why can't I do these with two arms? They can't be that hard,
right? Because he went through puberty.
And I remember trying to, again, you're 12, 13 years old. So I'm like, I'm just going to skip ahead and try to do the one-arm push-ups. And then but, what I wound up doing is learning how to do push-ups on my knees. And then I did single-arm push-ups on my knees. And then eventually, single-arm push-ups on your knees are a complete waste of time, especially the way 12-year-old me was doing them. But eventually, I was able to. I figured out actually the same way that I teach people to do push-ups now, which is if I put my hands on, a box or a chair, it's kind of the same motion. And 12-year-old, 13-year-old me was starting to figure that stuff out. And as I make it lower and lower and lower, it gets harder and harder and harder. So I'm just going to keep doing that, and eventually I'll have a push-up. By the time I was 16, 17, which probably took too long, but new trainer. So by the time I was 16, 17, I had a push-up down. And I was very, very proud of that accomplishment. But at the same time, I think we need to understand that so many people aren't going to be like us, and they're going to quit earlier in the journey, especially now, because you and I are, we're obviously not 15, and the 15-year-old has so many other pieces of media, from TikTok to Instagram to their Nintendo Switch to Twitch, all these other things to the chores they have to do that they're never going to do. They have all these other things that are going to pull them away if their attempt at a push-up doesn't work in 2 weeks.
Right. It's almost like the need to create something else that's cool, that's doable for someone who can't do the push-up yet, so that they end up getting, how do we trick them?
Yeah.
That this is the cool thing, not the push-up, and then progress them to doing the push-up over time. What I'm hearing you say a lot of, and I'm curious if you feel this way also, is a lot of the education that's online for fitness that's coming from you, that's coming from Adon, that's coming from Ben Bruno, from anybody really, is I feel like it's the stuff that draws the person back in, or it's the stuff that draws the person who's young and looking for how to start, looking for how to start in. What I'm curious about is whether you think that stuff gets people off the couch who have never been a part of this lifestyle before. The person who maybe put wealth over health for the last 30, 40 years. The person who didn't get the push-up when they were in elementary school and said, forget about it, and then never did it for the next 30 years. And now all of a sudden they're in the category of 60+% of Americans who are overweight. Do you think that content gets them? Do you think they're seeing it? Do you think they're interested in it? And if not, what do you think we need to do to get them?
Anecdotally, I think it is getting them, and that's partly because probably like every other week I have somebody walk up to me and they're like, hey, your videos got me back into fitness, which is not to pump me up, and I don't think it's just me. If it's happening to me, it's happening to 1,000 other trainer types, right? So I think it is helping. I don't think it's obviously the only solution, but I think it works for a lot of people because I think they want something to be excited about. Mm-hmm. We can give them that. And so I think it is relatively working. I think we can do better things though, because we can do better things after we kind of grab their attention instantly, because once you have their attention, they have to feel like they can do something actionable. And I think we can be a little bit sharper about that as a profession overall, because it's like, okay, I saw the Superman push-up. How do I do that? Why does it matter? Where do I start? Like, I can't even do a plank, mm-hmm. right? And I think we still have a little bit of work to figure that out. But I think one of the tricks for fitness in general is a lot of the themes we need. We need to get, like, the basics haven't changed in terms of what gets you fit, what gets you strong, what's going to get you healthy. And because of that, it's like, but people have heard all of that on some level, and they've also not achieved things. They've not achieved their goals very often, and it's not necessarily the fault of the tool. It's because of their execution. And I think of guys who want big arms going in and doing biceps curls, and they saw me doing biceps curls, or they saw Arnold doing biceps curls,
or me. I mean, they might have seen me doing them.
True.
You laughed at me.
No,
I'm just joking. I'm joking. They didn't see me doing them.
But they like you pick the guy with the biceps curl, and they see they saw somebody doing it. They think they're doing it right. They pick up the idea of, well, the weight's got to get to my chest, right? But their version of the weight getting to their chest involves their hips rocking all over the place. And so in order to get it to that point, mm-hmm. and they're not taking advantage of the negative, and so because they don't understand those pieces, right? And I think our challenge in fitness is to what I try to do, and that's why I'm very big on, if you take the biceps curl, I'll just keep carrying the biceps curl thing because Arnold spotted me on it. We're just going to use that for the whole thing.
It's yours forever.
Yeah. But if you take the biceps curl, that's why I like to try to get people to pause in the middle of the rep, because in general, anecdotally, when I've done that with clients and when I've also, both in person and my virtual clients, it kind of helps when they have to pause mid-rep, it forces them to be a little bit stricter with their form, and then they start to feel what I need to get them to feel, right? I could give them a lecture on time under tension. I could give them a lecture on why you shouldn't kip. I could give them a lecture on all those things, right? Why an exercise isn't point A to point B. If I can find creative and useful ways to help them feel it, because that on some level is what I need them to do, especially with the biceps curl, then I'm winning. And that's where I feel like we have a gap right now between that super exciting content, and then we obviously need them to start at the beginning, but making the beginning feel just interesting enough and just satisfying enough in that they're accomplishing something, that they feel like just satisfied enough that they do feel like they're accomplishing something.
Yeah. Is it okay if I push you on that?
You can.
Your words were interesting.
Yeah.
You said when people come to you, they say, hey, you inspired me to get back into fitness. That's the person I think it's speaking to really well. The one who was in fitness.
True.
Who left for whatever reason, who now is coming back. And I think that's incredibly important, because it's almost like if we already have it, let's work on preserving what we have before we start talking about like how do we grow it. If the fitness industry is churning people out of it, and we're just trying to fill it with new people, then it's like filling a leaky bucket with new water. It's just going to leak out the bottom anyway. We need to keep those people in. So I think that's extremely important work. And then I go back. I was tying that in my head as you were talking back to when you were talking about working out with Don and how you're a control freak about your workouts. And what was interesting about that to me is he sat here and talked about trying to get you to come work out with him.
He did?
Yeah.
I didn't. Yeah. Okay. I got to rewatch.
So he talked about trying to get you to come work out with him. He's like, I want to work out with Ebenezer. Like, I want to train with him. I want to bring him out. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how long it took him to get you to come train with him. And now I'm hearing something that maybe he didn't know, which is that you're a control freak about the way that you train, and you don't necessarily want to go out and train the way that Don trains with him. Maybe I'm making.
Don't start stuff.
I'm not starting stuff. Yeah. But I'm hearing now also it's the number of touch points, right? Because you by hearing and seeing him over and over again, knowing he's credible, knowing he's not trying to get something from you, it makes it safer to say, okay, I'm in the area. I'll come through. What's the big deal? What's the worst that happens? And you putting this stuff out over and over and over again brings the person who may have either left or be on their way out of the fitness industry because they're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I don't know why I come to the gym anymore. To stick around and to be inspired by it all over again because they heard it at the right time in the right way when the opportunity was appropriate for them, right?
Yeah.
What I think would be a fascinating, we'll call it a study, but it ends in an article for men's for men's health, would be to walk the streets of New York City to ask people, hey, have you gone to a gym in the last 20 years? Consecutively for a month or more. And to ask all of the people who say, yes, but I stopped going, or no, and I never went, why not? I think, because I did that here.
Yeah.
I did it, and because when we were opening up our flagship location down the block, I was like, well, our target client is the person who is in every gym's canceled folder or feels like that's unapproachable for them. So I want to know why people are in the canceled folder when they can tell me the truth because I'm not the person they stopped paying. The number one reason people told me they stopped going to the gym, number one, this blew my mind. And I interviewed over 100 people. They were uncomfortable. They didn't want to be in someone else's way. That blew my mind.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me I might be in somebody's way in the gym. But I'd be so curious to see Men's Health do something like that at scale with the number of people you guys could reach by just saying, hey, can I ask you 5 questions? I'm writing an article for Men's Health. I think it would be so cool.
It is fascinating, but I think that is the old school gym mentality, right? And that's that. Now there are more gym etiquette posts out there. So I spend way too much time on social media. Well,
it's your job.
Yeah, true. If I spent less time, I'd be more jacked, right? But now I think that's the gym etiquette thing, and that's some of the wrestling match of the gyms I was going into 15, 20 years ago. I remember being really, really scared the first time out. The only gym I lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
I know Allentown.
You do?
Yeah. The Sands Bethlehem is right down the block from there, and I went there one time to hang out with a friend.
Yeah, awesome. Once.
Yeah, one time.
So I live about 25 minutes from there. Small town. Had one gym, right? And it was kind of known as a bodybuilder gym. Those are the places where people, it was a bodybuilder gym, or it was your high school gym where all the football players are training. And they all have something specific to do. And I remember being there and walking into that bodybuilding gym. It's like $5 day pass. Remember that? That was amazing.
Yes.
But, I walked in and I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? Everybody's on a machine, everybody's doing multiple sets, and then they're resting. And it can feel, I can imagine for somebody now, like, especially if you ever watch my content, if, you all should. But if you watch my content, I like to do, when I'm in the gym, I like to superset, triset, stuff like that, which takes up 3 machines and can be really annoying, right? I'm going to do it anyway. But I could see where somebody walks in and they feel like, they're in the way, or they feel uncomfortable, and I've had people in my, like, very close to me who were, a little bit uncomfortable like that. So I do understand it, because that is that old gym template. And I feel like we're all, the gyms themselves, group fitness studios, even, Arnold again telling me like, go find yourself a training partner, right? We're all trying to shift that mentality, or shift the conversation and the way it's perceived from, hey, you're one person in the gym and you're in everybody's way, over to an idea of community. I am not the hugest CrossFit fan in the world for a lot of reasons. We may go there, we may not. But the one thing I feel like CrossFit has done really, really well is create a sense of community, and make the fitness experience feel really, really inviting for the people, for their audience, for regular people. And that's why I think when I used to go to a lot of CrossFit gyms pre-pandemic. And you would see newcomers there because they have a way of making people feel welcome.
Man, that's a rabbit hole. I'm deciding if I want to jump down it. Look, we can jump down it for a moment, because I think you're right in some ways. I've owned 3 CrossFit gyms, and that's where a lot of my my experience in fitness started off in a World's gym. And it was bodybuilders. It was learning how to clean mirrors with newspaper. Because if you clean mirrors with a towel, you leave lint. If you clean it with a newspaper, some of that black ink comes off and actually shines the mirror even better. I started learning that there. I started learning how to take dumbbell, like the key dumbbells. Remember the dumbbells back in the day that had like an Allen key at the end?
Oh, God, yeah.
So, yeah, but those are the ones, like you see them in the Ronnie Coleman documentary, right?
Yeah.
That's what we had there. So I was learning how to take those things apart, put the stuff, like clean out the dust that would be inside, re-oil, put it back in, spin it all around. That's where I learned. I left that gym when the owner set me up to sell a bag of steroids to a member. I didn't know it. The guy comes up. He's like, hey, I need a gym bag. I'm like, we don't sell gym bags. He's like, you do. There's a gym bag for me under the front desk. I'm like, there's a gym bag under there. That's strange. So I pull it out, and he just gave me $700 something, and he's like, no change. I'm like, oh, I know what I just did. I'm not going to work here anymore. Like I don't need that to be an undercover cop next time. So that was where I got my start. Then I moved into Equinox, where I learned the business. That is a business.
Yeah.
Top to bottom business. And then I opened CrossFit gyms because I was like, you know what? This is more approachable for me from a business owner perspective. I don't need $25 million to start. And that's what I think, like the Equinox I was working in cost just to open. Like, so this is something I can do. The community vibe there is such that, at least from my experience, if you're comfortable walking in and being there, the community is fantastic in that gym. Not necessarily gym to gym, but in that gym. It is, however, really difficult for people who don't have a level of confidence around the way that their body works to walk in the first place. And I see them trying as an entity, CrossFit, and I think it's not about CrossFit, it's about fitness in general, trying to make their marketing content suggest this is a fit for everybody. The everyday person. Look, here's an ad about it. Here's a video about a 92-year-old grandma. Here's a video about a 78-year-old with Parkinson's. Both of them do CrossFit. But then, if we go to the gym level and I say to the gym owner, would you like a full roster of 92-year-old grandmas? They're like, no. How about 78-year-olds with Parkinson's? No. Hey, do you know what Parkinson's is? It's like shaky disease, right? Yeah. Do you know what that means for their fitness? No. So it's like it's this juxtaposition of they're doing, in my opinion, some really cool stuff, trying to make fitness approachable for everybody, building a community once you're inside of the gym. But the owners of those businesses and the coaches in those businesses are faced with the reality that those people typically don't walk in, and they don't actually want those people, but now they're being told that's where the virtue is. Do you follow?
Yeah, and like listening to you talk about that, I think there was a, midway through you said, it's not just the problem CrossFit gyms are facing, it's fitness in general. And it is kind of, I almost feel like it is I'm thinking out loud a little bit on this because it's kind of getting a bunch of mouse wheels turning and they're really rusty right now. But I'm
proud to have been the guy who started them back up.
I think it is the riddle of how do we get the super fit guy, because some of that is also what's intimidating about CrossFit. Like those guys are the top level of any CrossFit gym, let alone CrossFit period, is usually a bunch of guys with 6-pack abs and, 25 muscle ups in a row.
And their shirts are off.
Yeah, exactly that. Which, it's like some people love doing that.
That's why I got into it. That's why getting our marketing strategy at the first location was get a place with a picture window and everybody take your shirts off.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Exactly. And so I think the riddle of fitness has always been, how do we find a way for, the newcomer, slightly overweight mother of 4, to coexist in the same workout environment, if not even, and possibly even the same workout as the the super fit guy with the 6-pack and 12 biceps. And I don't honestly know the answer to that. I think we're trying.
I don't know that they do. I think that the more that we try to do it, the more that we actually make a wedge. And I'll share why. If I'm bringing a 65-year-old in to train, the things I'm going to assess prior to developing a program are different than a 35-year-old, than a 25-year-old. For example, the reason I chose 65 is because there's something very clearly that they need that, generally speaking, we don't need to look for in 25 to 35, even 40-year-old people. And that is foot speed. What is your foot speed? What is your ability to correct your mechanics if you're about to fall so that you catch yourself with your feet instead of your face? Because when a 65-year-old, 70-year-old falls, the implications are far more severe than they are for a 25 to 35-year-old. And foot speed is actually the thing that is most predictable to reduce their likelihood of falling. And so if we put that person into a CrossFit class or into a bodybuilding circuit or into a Les Mills class, and the goal is squat stamina or squat strength, that person does not actually need that as much as they need foot speed. And then we can start to develop the squat stamina, the squat strength. And I think that the more that we try to jam these people into the same thing at the same time and say this is for everybody, the more that we make it obvious for the people for whom it's not a fit, we don't understand them.
And it's funny because one of the things I do in addition to fitness is I used to, and I still do because we work some fitness and tech entwined so much. And a lot of tech companies would ask me, who about their apps or about their smartwatch. And in general, I would always start with a question of who is this for? And because it's funny because my mind thinks in that same specificity. It is about, you're right, different experiences. I think the business of fitness is where things get messed up because it's the same as the business of tech. When I ask people, who is your app for? Who is your smartwatch for? Even if I go into certain gyms, right? Who is this gym experience for? They'll be like everybody. And I'll be like, no, you're that spin thing. I'm sorry, it's just not for me, right? So it's already not for everybody, right? And I think the reason a lot of people want to say everybody and try to, and it's wild because then you try to aim your product, whether your fitness product, at everybody, and you're aiming at nobody.
Yep.
However, you feel like you can, if you aim at everybody, you can eventually have a much grander scale and make more money, right? So money is the root of all evil. That's what it is.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. We just nailed it. Well, I agree with you on all of that, except the sarcastic thing you said at the end, which I don't think you believe either. But
delete that out too.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
When I think about this kind of stuff, when I think about who's the target audience, all that, what I see is the person, like for me, I built a business down the block from here that would not be the primary place I would want to train. Right? If I was looking for a place that I was going to be pumped up to show up at every day, it's not that. Frankly, it's the bodybuilding gym that I used to train at when I was 25 years old or 21 years old, because I want to feel that way again. Oftentimes I want to be surrounded by guys who are just gorillas, bigger than me, walking around, who I'm like, damn, if I jump on that pec deck right now, I might get in that guy's way. I like that little bit of tension for me when I'm training. And I do like having the training partner who's like, let's go, 3 more reps. No, you got 3 more. I do like that. And I didn't build a place for that because I think there are already plenty of places for that. But when you talk about who's it a fit for, I think that's so that's so crucial for business owners to start thinking about, trainers to start thinking about, even in their own personal training business. So I'll share something that I recently saw that I'm curious your take on. I saw an article on LinkedIn that was the 7 reasons why buying high-end strength equipment is the best, revenue lever for your big box gym. And I normally I wouldn't read it because I'm like, that's bullshit. But I recently spoke at an event where there were about 50 big box gym owners who represented over 200 locations. And the thing that they're ready in 2 seconds to drop $1 million, $500,000 on, was it G9? Is that there's some...
Is that the new like German brand?
Yes.
Like
Yeah. They're ready to drop $500,000 to $1 million on that equipment. But you ask them, do you want to develop the acumen of your training department? And they're like, no, like we're not doing that. I'm like, that costs you less than $100,000 a year. And it has a lever on it. I'm curious where you think that comes from.
What do you mean?
The idea that like we need to buy more machines, but we're not going to invest in our people.
That is a tough one. I don't know. I think it's a little bit, because those are big box gyms, right? And big box gyms, I think in general, just don't. The philosophy of the big box gym, the trainer is kind of just an ancillary piece of everything. And I think I think the big box gym, and again, this is the case for the CrossFit style gym, because I feel like CrossFit gyms the equipment is very standard-ish, right? And so I think they spend a little bit, their programming and the trainer is a little bit more important in that context. And so it's kind of interesting to juxtapose the two ideas, because I think, and that's why, as I said, I think there's a sense, and again, it's not a perfect sense of community in CrossFit gyms, but it is a sense of community.
For sure.
Right? I think when the big box gym, the general philosophy around the big box gym is the exact same as, or still relatively the same. We're trying to change it, I think, over time, but the general philosophy of the big box gym remains the same as it was 15, 20 years ago. And it's a gym for people who are already relatively invested in fitness. It is not a gym for the newcomer. And so I think that's because the people who are already invested in fitness, and I don't know if it was I'm guessing it was the same for you, given that you say you kind of missed the world gym atmosphere. I remember when the first gym I moved in, when I first moved to the Bronx, the first gym I was going to, they kind of wanted to be, you know, Bev Francis Powerhouse.
Yeah, of course, since Acid.
Yeah, exactly. Most amazing gym ever. So much equipment. It's
right. There isn't a square foot of floor to be on if you're not lifting weight.
Exactly. You can spend 6 hours in there and not have done a set on every machine. This gym was called Star Fitness. They actually very recently closed down. But every time they wanted to be Bev Francis Powerhouse of the North. And so they would get in new equipment like every 2 months. And every 2 months for me, because I'm that fitness guy who's, that's all I breathe. It was like a new toy, right? And so I think in a weird way, and so it is from a business standpoint, I think there's a lot going on there, but I think in a weird way, it's because one, they don't care about community or necessarily fostering, the people who are coming to them read bodybuilding.com and T Nation and hopefully a lot of Men's Health and come in with their workout already done, and they want to be left alone, right? And that's who I think the big box gym is catering to. And so they just don't, they don't see a need to develop trainers who are going to then foster like the newcomers, because they're not, I think too that there's a little, when you do that, in theory, you're aiding and you probably know more about the business of this side of this than me, because I'm not as active in that right now. But you're probably aiding your retention, because the people you already have feel like you're always going to get new equipment. You're not going to invite a new audience in, but that was never, on some level, that was never your game plan. Your only game plan for inviting a new audience in as a big box gym is January, February. Everybody wants to lose weight. That's it.
Right. What's wild about that is to me, it goes back to what we were talking about before. Who's the client?
Yeah.
And I think that they're like these big box gyms, just like the CrossFit gyms, run into the overextension of who they want the client to be. And so then their equipment, their offerings, their environment are not aligned to one person, right? Like, we work with a Gold's Gym. I'm very proud to support this client. They're a great client. They do a great job. When we started with them, they were about average for what a Gold's Gym personal training department would do in a month. They're not in a high income area. They're not in a high population density area. They are now the top 3 revenue producing Gold's Gym personal training department in the country every month, which is awesome. And the owner of that gym goes out and buys the new equipment whenever it's coming down the pipe, right? And I never thought about it from the perspective of the ideal client for the business is the person who already has their training evolved. And so now they're coming in they're coming in because they can wear headphones. They don't have to talk to anybody. They know what their program is for the day. They might have a seam that goes up the butt of their pants that separates their butt cheeks. Like that is the intended client. And I just wonder what would it be like for those kinds of big box gyms if they just leaned into that and they were like, we are for badass people who've been training for 5 to 10 years plus and want to maximize your training environment.
So I think the answer to that question is very, very simple. It would be Bev Francis Powerhouse. Because,
right.
And that gym leans into that and caters to that. And it works. It's arguably the most legendary gym.
It's like 50 years old, right? It's still crushing.
Yeah. So that's the because that is, I feel like on some level, just from a mental standpoint, we're always going to gravitate to, the reality is, and this is not meant to come off in any which way, but I think to some extent, I want to train around people who can push me versus, like somebody who might not be there yet. Right. And we're always going to gravitate. Maybe it's okay, like you said, for gyms to kind of specify, and maybe if that is, and again, I feel like we're theorizing a lot
of course,
which is fun, right? It makes for good conversation. But I feel like if the big box gym were to take that tactic, yes, one is going to make it a really, really good experience for the big box gyms. Those equipment companies will sell more awesome gear too. But then I guess the trick is to find that right kind of group or that right box, or create some kind of box that is ideally suited to the person who we're not serving in that equation, and who very often we're not serving enough in fitness, which is that kind of, I can, like the ultra beginner who might not even want it, or kind of wants it because they saw like a Superman push-up post yesterday.
Yeah, I think the ultra beginner, I think one of the things that we take for granted in fitness, especially somebody like myself for a long time, I started working out by just playing. Right? I'm playing sports, so I'm going to run, so I'm in shape for my sports. I'm going to do push-ups so that I'm stronger for my sports. I'm going to get those dumbbells that are just a bar with all the weights that you like pin turn on the end. Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like there's 2 10s, 2 5s, 2 2.5s, or however many, and you can build your own dumbbell, unscrew the end, pull it off, change the weight, put the weight back on, that kind of stuff. That's where my fitness experience started, in my bedroom, right when I was like in middle school, high school. And so it's always been something that's a part of my life. I believe that for people for whom it's not been a part of their life, or for whom it's not a natural progression of something else that they love, we take for granted the educational slope that there is, and the amount of overwhelm of walking into that gym knowing that you don't know what to do and wanting to not look stupid, actually make progress, not get hurt, all of these different things. And I think that for the person you just described, that's where the high quality trainer comes in.
I think, yes, I think there are two. And I think that's where it was interesting, because I think that's where virtual fitness has changed the game, because it's allowed people from, I've worked with a couple virtual fitness apps over the last couple of years, and I was always interested in the clientele that I wound up training because of that. I remember there was I would train like a guy from Chicago, right? Or like a guy, like people who couldn't normally connect with me. Because I think virtual fitness is one open door that helps people that can help in that way, right? The other is, I think, and I think this is the rise of Peloton and Hydro and Tonal, is these devices that, yes, they cost a lot of money, but people can do them in the comfort of their own home. Whether those devices teach clean mechanics and really aid in properly getting people where we need them from a movement perspective is highly debatable, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think those are the two entry points that didn't exist a couple years ago, but that are, I don't want to say I don't want to say that they're solving the problem, but they're providing us with a little bit of an idea of where the solution might be. I think the power of virtual training plus, say, Tonal and Peloton, where where we can analyze a little, bit more data from people. I think where Tonal, where devices like that, there's another one in Texas, I believe it's called OxyFit.
Okay.
And that incorporates force plates. It's essentially, imagine like Tonal on steroids.
Right.
Where that could take us will help a lot of beginners. But the cost right now is so prohibitive that it's not helping enough of those ultra beginners.
Sure. When the DVD player first came out, it was cost prohibitive too. You know, it's one of these things where there's two things you said there that I think are important to touch on. One is that the cost of innovation is high.
Yeah.
And so if you're somebody listening to this and you're like, yeah, sure, but that's too expensive for most people. Yeah, it needs to be to start, because they don't have mass adoption of a marketplace, so they can't order parts at any kind of it has to be expensive to start. Anti-lock brakes started off as a feature on Porsche racing cars. You couldn't get them. Now you can't buy a car anywhere in the Western Hemisphere new that does not have anti-lock brakes in the car standard, all the way down to your $16,000 entry-level cars. I made that number up, not a car head. The other thing that you said was the idea of mixing and matching these modalities, and that they're not perfect. Certainly not. What I believe trainers could find some benefit in doing is to discontinue a fight with convenience for their client. So if someone has a Tonal in their house, or they have a Peloton in their house, and you're a trainer and you're telling them, don't use that, it sucks, it's not going to get you the results, I'm the guy. Well, you just told them that they're dumb for having made a decision to buy something that was convenient and that thousands of other people from around the world, maybe even millions, think is a good idea. Instead, lean into, that's great. How often do you use it? Great. Can I help you design the intensity with which you use it when you do? Yes. Awesome. This is such a huge help for me to help you. Now your client can feel like they made a good decision, and you can help that actually be a good decision.
And that holds so true too, because that goes beyond, like you can slam somebody for buying the $25 8-pound dumbbells at Target, right? Or you can help them use it. That was one of the interesting lessons, I think, for a lot, or it should have been one of the interesting lessons, I believe, of the pandemic, is that whatever load you have around the house, you can make work for a workout, right? And not everybody is going to be able to afford. You're right. That's where trainers, I think, can help bridge the gap, because not everybody is going to be able to afford the high-end Tonal. If they have it, don't tell them it's dumb. By the same token, if somebody bought a $150 rower, and I'm the biggest snob with fitness equipment too. Like, I'm like commercial everything. If it's not commercial, it's not living in my gym.
I want you to keep that thought for a second. I want people to know what you mean by commercial, because there's residential versions of, for example, a treadmill.
Yeah.
And then there's a commercial version of the same treadmill. One is effectively overbuilt in such a way that they expect it to get 20,000 uses a week. The other one, they expect you to put your clothes on.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about when you say commercial.
Yeah, and I get my mileage from my commercial gear, but I'm the biggest snob with that. But at the same time, if all they can get is a $150 rower, it is my job as a trainer. The same way, if you put me on an island with a $150 rower and it's just me and the rower, I better figure out how to get a workout in. I mean, aside from trying to swim off the island.
Right.
If that's all my client has, and I can't give them a good workout with that, then on some with that in their body weight, obviously, then on some level, I need to kind of improve as a trainer. I think we as kind of a training community can be less, and that's a real lesson that I've learned at Men's Health, to be honest. We need to be like less attacking of these things that we may not like and find ways to take advantage of them. I am not a big step count person, but if I can use step count to motivate a client, I'm all for it. Let's get 15,000 steps today.
I'm asking you this question because I think that you might actually challenge some of my beliefs. What are your thoughts on the current barrier to entry for education for the fitness professional? And let me give some context. If you're an esthetician, an esthetician, meaning you're going to help people apply and remove makeup. I'm not talking about people who get facials, so I might be using a cosmetologist. That's the word I'm looking for. A cosmetologist. You're going to help people apply and remove makeup. You're going to help them with lotion selection, that kind of stuff. And for those of you out there who are cosmetologists and say, I just, minimized your career, that's not what I meant to do. I'm just speaking to something people seem to understand. You need 1,000 hours before you can sit for the exam. So 1,000 hours of guided internship, if you will, under the presence of somebody who's licensed before you can sit for the exam to become a licensed cosmetologist. To be a personal trainer who's allowed to train in a gym, you need a high school or GED diploma, and in some states, a first aid certification. I'm curious your thoughts on whether that's a good thing that we have a low barrier and we can then bring a lot of people in and build their standard over time, or if that's a part of our problem.
It's a really hard question. You're good with the hard questions today.
Thank you.
I think on some level, right? I think our barrier to entry is a little bit low, and I think that is why so many trainers or so many people on Instagram and TikTok can call themselves trainers without having proper knowledge, right? So I think it is a low barrier to entry. The only certification we've had for a long time that I think the only certification we have that is college degree is the CSCS, and everything else is very attainable. But it's hard because it really depends on, I think, what you think the role of the trainer should be. And it also depends on, I think it depends on the clientele to some extent, right? Because if it is that beginner, it is okay. If it is that ultra beginner, it is okay for it to be just a little bit more about just bringing energy and getting them moving, right?
Be accountable.
Anybody, I mean, the trick with that though is be accountable. I can be accountable to my training partner too, and that makes it hard for us, I think, as a business when the barrier to entry is so low. I think that's why trainer salaries or trainer rates are so all over the place. If you go to Ohio, I had a trainer in Ohio who came up through a program we do at Men's Health where we help young trainers from marginalized communities get certified, educated, etc.
That's cool.
He was charging people $20, right? Versus, I'm sure I imagine your rate, my rate, Don Saladino's is in the hundreds, right? It makes it really hard for there to be any kind of standard, and because the standard is so low, it allows for a lot of kind of criticism and I feel like infighting within the profession, and a lot of hierarchy and confusion. I think if the standard were higher, you would have much fewer trainers. You're still going to have people who call themselves trainers on the web, and who make a living doing that, because the same way you have I can't think of anything, but the same way you have people who are always not certified, just doing what they do.
Well, you have people who are self-anointed health coaches, as compared to someone who may be like a physician assistant.
So the problem with our profession right now is that the lines blur too much because there are too many. Because the barrier is so low, there are too many, and I mean, I'll just say it, there are too many like garbage certifications out there, right? I know trainers who have, I think the CSCS is obviously tops in the land, right? the only test, as far as I can tell, that's relatively hard, right? I know trainers who have failed that, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to go take the NASM because I'm going to be a trainer anyway, right? That's not how it is in say the NBA, right?
No.
If you're not a baller, you know, but I guess it is to some extent. If you're not a baller, go play in Israel, right? Or no offense to
Israel's best.
Yeah, but you know, if you're not a baller, go play in Israel, go play in Japan, go play in whatever. But you're not in the NBA, right? And we don't have that feeling as a profession, and I think it leads a lot of people to think, you know, that the profession is a little bit illegitimate, and and we're not taken seriously.
Yeah, the according to behavior and labor statistics, the average pay for a trainer is $19 an hour.
Yeah,
that's like so, and it's the second highest turnover career to service and hospitality.
So when I came to New York, and started following trainers, especially actually when I got to Men's Health and started working more in there, a lot of the trainers who initially we worked with were also Wilhelmina models, right? And it's like, well, and you know, I would talk to various trainers here and there, and you got the impression they were trainers because they were failed actors, right? And they were just guys who looked good, you know? And it's a problem, right? And I think I think the low barrier to entry is a problem for two reasons. Because if we go to that newcomer, and I feel like specifically that's who we've kind of zoned in on in this conversation, that ultra beginner. Yes, they can get, you know, a real quick motivational dose from somebody who's not a properly equipped trainer, right? But if we're going to educate them and get them to a point where they don't need a trainer because they understand what the heck they're doing. Like anybody can make them sweat, right? So the Wilhelmina model trainer can make them sweat, right? But you would argue that what the CSCS trainer or a properly equipped trainer, period, who's gone through the education and has, you know, like you said, 1,000 hours or something like that of experience, is going to be able to do is going to, instead of just making them sweat, they're going to make them sweat with the proper motions that will set that person up for life. And I think that's what's missing. I also think it's an art. It's an art. Like training is an art, right? Because it's about I need to give you a good workout. I need to keep you interested, and I need to stealthily hit all the things that you don't want to do, and we're going to do it in the workout.
Yes.
And that is there are a handful of trainers who I've met in New York who can execute that at a high level, especially for the beginner. And so I think that too many beginners, because there has been a point. I think there was an influx of beginners because COVID placed, just the whole COVID conversation placed health and wellness like super front and center for everybody. First thing on the news every night, right? If people still watch the news, I don't know if they do, but
I stopped.
But you know, front and center, like everywhere, right, was COVID, right? So a lot of people suddenly cared a little bit about their fitness and might have gotten like a virtual workout, or as soon as kind of COVID started to wrap up, was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the gym. And if their entry point was somebody who didn't properly equip them, or who made them sweat but didn't, you know, there was nothing redeeming about that, or they just hurt the next day, then they left, and that's just not good, right? So I think in general a higher bar is better. It's just figuring out that higher bar, because the one thing is, you know, just figuring out that higher bar I think is a hard part. Yeah,
look, I mean, at Active Life, our bar I think is actually too high to be the entry bar for a fitness professional.
Yeah,
you know, it's we would love for everybody to want to go through 13 months and 1,000 hours of education, application, and mentorship, but not everybody does, and not everybody needs to be the trainer who's going to bridge, you know, the gap of where fitness kind of leaves off today and healthcare starts. But I think that there's a lot of use in creating a standard of excellence that allows someone to come in so that, and like, let me give I'm going to say this better. I believe that most of the people who want to hire a trainer want to hire, first and foremost, a person who they want to be more like. And second, a person who they want to be more like, who can teach them how to be like them through exercise. I think that what we fail to do by keeping the bar so low in terms of allowing people into the industry is that it's the thing people do until they figure out what they want to do. And it's supposed to be a premium product. I don't want to pay a premium price for the person who is doing this thing until they can figure out what they want to do. I want to pay a premium price to somebody who's dedicated their life to doing this excellently.
Well, and very similar thought that I have is it's also like trainers come in and they train, like, who do you really want to train, right? Do you want to train the beginner? Do you want to train soccer moms? Do you want to train athletes? There's virtue in kind of being a generalist and being able to do all of that. But on some level, trainers can too often come in and say, I just want to train people, right? And then I see them, they kind of want to train football players, but they're going to train, but each audience really requires like a slightly different skill set and slightly different goals. That's a very similar question. Very often trainers fill up my DMs with, hey, I want to help men's health, right? I want to, I want to help men's health. How do I get in contact? How do I, I want to write for you guys, whatever. I'm like, what's your specialties? After, if I respond at all, cause it's a lot of them, my first question will be, what's your specialty? And the trainer who answers, oh, I can train, I train everybody, like whatever you need. Like I could train athletes. I'm like, so you can't really train anybody, And I think what would be, it would be great on some level. And people are always gonna have to, it's like when we're in college, right? You choose a major and it's not always the right major. That's why I have an accounting degree. But you have to choose something and you have to go down a path of specificity, right? And it would be great if on some level, from a training standpoint, it's like, okay, I want to train athletes. So let me go down a very specific road with that and focus on, mastering rate of force development, right? I want to train, soccer moms. So let me focus on, I want to train, ultra beginners. So let me focus a little bit more on the psych of motivation, right? It would be, I think that would be an ideal way to somehow do it. But all the bodies of certification that we have, I feel like are not, that's what we're talking about is probably 20 years down the road.
I'd like to believe that we're going to drive it forward.
Yeah.
That NASM has a place, ACE has a place, ISSA, all of them have a place. Active Life is going to drive it forward. And the reason why I say that is because we are going towards ultra specialization of helping the people in the canceled folder at the gym and the people who never walked in the first place, but who are one step away right now from wanting to. Like they want to, but they just don't think it's for them. We develop the people to help those people. And I think that when we demonstrate the efficacy of not only the work, but the business of it, people will start to say, I want to do something like that, but for this. And at least that's part of my hope. Final question for you, and you just prompted it, was people write you all the time, I want to help men's health. In my mind, that's not what they're really asking most of the time. They're saying, how do I get featured in men's health? And I'm curious. I believe those people would all be better off not asking, how do I help you? Because now they gave you a job. But by suggesting, hey, I've read the last 14 episodes of Men's Health looking for an article about this, and I didn't find one. So I wrote one. And I wanted to send it your way and see if you think it's a fit for the magazine or not. And if you read that article, I imagine that's a DM you're going to read. And then you'll decide if I want to read that article or not. And if you read the article and it's a fit, you might say, hey, there are parts of it that are a fit. We need to edit it for this, and this, but I would love to talk to you about helping us do that. A, is that true? And B, for people who do genuinely want to contribute to what you're working on at Men's Health in the fitness department, what is the best way for them to do that so they're not costing you more work to find them?
It's a really good question. I'm gonna switch my trainer mode off and shift into journalism mode. Yeah. So that's one of the issues with a lot of the DMs I get. So one of my first lessons. My second internship I went to Syracuse for journalism. My second internship out of there
for journalism.
Yeah, excellent. Really cold. I hate it up there.
Yeah, no, the place stinks, but the school is good.
Education rocks. Yeah. But my second internship was ESPN the magazine back when they had a magazine, and I remember being super excited to be there. And so I started, you get the whole game, even when you're employed at a place is you pitch them, right? You pitch like different editors, different ideas you might have. And I pitched three ideas to this one editor over email, and he sent me back an email, and he was like, so my pet peeve is like, did you actually read the magazine? And he's like, because it doesn't seem like you did, because we literally wrote about this 3 months ago. So he's like, I'm not gonna read any of these, right? And that was kind of a really big lesson for me in terms of I got to actually read the magazine, not just look at the pictures of Adrian Peterson. I looked at all. I was very into the art of that magazine because it was amazing, right? But I had to do more, right? And I think one of the problems with a lot of the trainers I get, yeah, you're right, because most of them come to me, and I generally get a sense of, I want to be featured. And then there's this other game being played now in 2023 where it's, I want to somehow be connected with that magazine once. That way I can put at Men's Health Mag something in my bio, right? And so
I never even considered that angle.
Yeah, because you're not like 21, but yeah, and I'm also like a 22-year-old trainer. Come on, like live life a little bit, train people. If you're 22, you're not, and this is not disrespectful. If you're a 22-year-old trainer, it's not working for me. I need more experience. I need you to have tried and failed with clients and tried and failed with yourself, right? That way then you're positioned to give advice. But I think I've gotten a couple where it is, I think if somebody, we produce a lot of content, right? Across platforms, between, 60, 70, 80 pages of print magazine, probably 20, 30 stories going out online, not all fitness, but probably 6 or 7 stories on fitness going out online every single day. Videos, it's a lot. Yeah. Big operation. I'm on top. But
there you go.
But
stay hungry.
Exactly. That's another Arnold movie. Video content. So we produce a lot of content already, and if you as a trainer are not paying attention to that content, then 9 times out of 10 you're gonna what you're pitching me is stuff we've already done, right? Which, to be honest, all the greatest fitness exercises were taken centuries ago. All the greatest fitness stories were written decades ago, right? How to do a push-up. That's what people need to know. They don't need to know my new innovation on a single arm bench press, right? And so, but there are like new spins and new ways to teach things. So we're open to that. But I do very badly want to, if it seems like somebody has paid attention to my content, right, to the content that we're putting out at Men's Health, then I will listen, right? They don't necessarily, because again, there's a lot of DMs and there's a lot of other emails flying back and forth. So I almost don't want to read like a full article because that's, 1,000 words of my life I'm not going to get back, right? But I do want people to pay attention to the magazine and pitch me ideas, because if I do respond to the DMs that I do respond to, if they kind of pass the test of what's your specialty, then I do ask them, well, send me 3 ideas of things you want to write. One of the issues for trainers, or one of the challenges for trainers from a media standpoint, is the 3 things they wind up suggesting they think are super interesting, right? And they fall into one of 2 categories. Either A, they're so super nerdy that like I'm into them, but I know my audience isn't, the Men's Health audience isn't going to be able to understand them. Or B, they're so they're so basic that we've written about that 17 times, and I can tell that they just don't know the audience, right? The way you get familiar, and this is like a general media tip for anybody, any trainer who wants to write for any outlet, the way you learn an outlet's audience, whether it's Men's Health, Women's Health, Men's Fitness, Journal of Strength and Conditioning, is you read the content. And if you haven't taken the time to read the content, you do not have my respect, and you do not have my attention. Not to be cold about it, but just to be completely honest. You had a second half of that question. I don't know if I answered it.
The second half, well, you answered it. The second half was, how does somebody actually contribute? And what you're saying is, know what we need. Right? Yeah. The difference there is the person who is like, oh, Men's Health, they have a big reach. They would love what I have to say. That's about you.
Yeah.
Now, if you haven't read the journal or read the magazine, you can't know if they already have someone who they believe is a specialist in the thing that you think you're great at, who spent years developing a relationship with the director of fitness, And the director of fitness is not going to believe that your cold DM about an idea that you have where they found the guy is going to be better than the guys.
Yeah.
Right? It would be like if somebody sent you a DM right now and they were like, hey, I want to write an article about getting people, like what it would take to get in shape to be a superhero in a movie. You're like, okay, well, like, have you met Don?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you get someone in shape for a movie? What is there a unique, and you're not going to ask them all of these questions, but they need to be able to read those articles that Don's already written, the programs Don's already put out, and be able to say, hey, I saw Don's article about Wolverine and about, I always forget the name of the movie that Ryan Reynolds is in. Deadpool. And what I haven't seen in either of those was somebody who actually had to gain a ton of weight and then lose it after the movie was over. I would love to write an article for you about that. That's something you might be interested in because they know what you've done and what you haven't done.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other half of that too is yeah, I mean, it's just what you said is great. I think the other half of it too though is they also have to bring something, right? Like 9 times out of 10, I have if you want to be our sprint guy, this is a 35-year-old magazine. We'll be 35 later this year. I have an expert for that, right? So what are you bringing different behind the scenes, right? I try to really inspect the science of what people are suggesting, because maybe there is a new idea, right? Like, I mean, I don't know how much you pay attention to Weck method. Like David Weck has
I know all about David Weck.
Totally different way of viewing sprinting and movement, right? This is a new idea, right? How we apply it to the magazine is challenging sometimes.
It's hard to write about.
Yeah, exactly. Like we actually did a Weck method piece. Coiling core is his thing. Coiling is his thing. We did a Weck method piece. I want to say 4 to 5 years ago. But the reality is our reader is not trying to break Usain Bolt's world record in the 100, right? Our reader is trying to get abs, right? So I went down there, spent some time with them. We tweaked, we took those principles and we turned it into like a really good ab workout, which seems a little bit weird, right? But it worked for our reader.
No, I get it. You were like here to here to here,
exactly,
to here,
yeah.
And you're going to get great obliques from doing this. And as a byproduct, you might actually have better gait and run better, but you're not selling them better gait and running better. You're selling them abs.
Yeah. So it's like if you have a legitimately new idea, I will explore it, right? I'm also going to call your BS if it's a legitimately new idea that makes no sense because you're a 24-year-old trainer, right? No, it's not. I don't hate the YouTube.
Or you're 35 and instead of looking at things that exist, you're trying to invent things that have existed for a long time, and you invented a lesser version of what's already out there.
Exactly, and or you invented the same version, but you're calling it yours, and it's like, hey, I've been doing that half bench single arm press for like the last 8 years. Thanks for paying attention, right? I think the thing I tell trainers the most though is because again, we've been around, and I make it my business to know and study and follow and chase the very best in the business, right? Like I have a CSCS and I need my, credit units too, right? So we're trying to be out there as much as we can, right? But the thing I tell trainers that will help them the most, if you want to be in men's health, if you want to be in men's health, go be a good trainer first, because when you're good, when you're Don Saladino, we're going to come find you, and we're just going to not, and again, nobody wants to hear this, right? Because they all want to put Men's Health Mag in their bio right now. But we'll come find you because your certs will line up, because you were getting educated the whole time. You'll have this great client list. You will have this great approach to something that we need to solve. And so we'll come find you. But don't I don't need your help that much. And again, I don't mean to sound callous or highfalutin, but I just don't need your help that much right now.
You're speaking to substance, man.
Yeah.
That's it. You're speaking to substance. And I remember being the young trainer who was like, I know you have a specialist in that, but I'm better than you're a specialist in that. And you just don't know me yet. So I have to get on your radar to let you know me. And that never worked. It never worked because it wasn't true.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I didn't know. And it took me time failing and going through this stuff and learning the hard lessons, getting punched in the face by reality to actually figure out how to bring real value to real people.
There's so many, like even for me too, right? There's so many things like the way I train people as a 22-year, because I remember being in college. I got my first client when I was 20, right? It was like
Same.
it was somebody like down the hall who was like, hey, I want those abs. And so I was like, okay, my initial rate was $20, right? $20, like that was like two fried chicken things at the cafeteria. But the way I trained that person was not smart. It was like, let's go hard, let's do all this stuff. Then I had a shoulder injury when I was, I think, 30, 31, 32. Tore my left labrum. That's what and so I had to learn about the shoulder hands. Like, there's so many ways to learn, right? I think the idea that, I feel like there's always been debate over whether the idea that if a trainer looks the part, they know more, right? If they don't look the part, they must be an idiot, right? I don't necessarily think that's true, but I do think a lot of older trainers who look the part, unless you're super lucky, you've been through injuries and you've had to learn things. I want to really work with people at Men's Health and just in general in my life, right? And that's one of the things I really appreciate about Don. Is like, he's had stuff happen here and there, and because of that, he has experience in being banged up, coming back from injury, and he has a different understanding of joints. I think that's really, really important, not just to trainers but to physical therapists. But now I'm just going off. So.
It's all good, man.
Yeah.
Ebenezer, you've been gracious with your time, with your information. You gave away what people needed to know, what people would want to know. Where can people find you for more?
My Instagram is the best place, at Ebenezer Samuel 23. So it's long, but we have everything there. And then the other big place, obviously, menshealth.com. We're putting out a ton of video, instructional video. So check that out. And then Men's Health Muscle at menshealth.muscle is our YouTube channel. So I'd love for you guys to check that out. And again, read that cover story on Arnold. Right. Best writing I've ever done.
Ebenezer, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.